Alright, on this video we're going to be talking about the Industrial Revolution. Now, remember the word revolution means a big change. So in the American Revolution or the Revolutionary War, we are changing from the colonies into the United States of America. Well, in the Industrial Revolution, we see a big change in America because of the use of machines. So industrial means using machines, revolution means a big change. So it's a big change in America because of machines. Now, one of the big things that changed America was the use of factories. Factories is when you make products by using machines. Okay, so the factory system means a production of goods or products in factories by machines. And what this meant when we start using machines to make products, it means that more products can be made at a faster rate, which means we can lower the price. Okay, so the factory system just means we can make more products for cheaper, which means we can sell it for cheaper. That's the factory system. Now, also there's this great thing about the United States of America. We have something called free enterprise. It's why shows like the Shark Tank can be a show. What free enterprise means is Americans get to decide what they make, who they sell it to, and for how much, which is great because when we start using machines in factories, people get to make whatever they want to make and sell whatever they make and to sell it to whoever they want to sell it to and for how much they want to sell it for, which means you can be as rich as you want as long as you have a good idea. Now, this free enterprise system is based on something called supply and demand. If you make something that a lot of people demand, then you have to start creating lots of it and get a lot of supply of it. So it's based on supply and demand, but the free enterprise system means you get to choose what you make, who you sell it to, and how much you sell it for. Now, factories created something called urbanization. We've definitely talked about urbanization before, but just to reiterate it and revisit it, it just means that it's a major movement of people from rural areas, which is countryside, to the cities, urban areas. So people were leaving their farms behind or leaving their families on the farm behind to move to the city for economic opportunities. They were moving to urban areas. They were like, there's not a lot of money in being on the countryside and farming in a very tiny farm. So let's move to the city, let's work in a factory, and let's make some money. Now, this meant that cities grew really, really fast, but remember, they really only grew in the north. Most of your cities are in the north. Now, with the using of factories, we also have more time, and so people start inventing more things. So we're going to talk about some inventions. One invention I want to talk about is something called interchangeable parts. And this was invented by Eli Whitney. And what this means are parts are made exactly the same to make it easier to replace parts and to produce things faster. So as you see here, this little part, they don't just make one of these at a time. They make thousands of them. So if that little piece breaks off, they can just replace it with a new one. Or when they're building it for the first time, they can build it really fast because all the parts are the same. Interchangeable parts is true for even like your iPhone. If you break your screen, you just get another identical part. That's an interchangeable part because you can switch it in and out when you break it. And it makes it very easy for them to make them really fast. The second invention by Eli Whitney was something called the cotton gin. Now this machine, it cleaned the seeds out of cotton. So you just twirl that little thing on the side, it takes these little claws through the cotton and takes out the seeds. Now this machine led to the growth of slavery because before people were like, cotton doesn't make you a lot of money because you have to spend so much time taking out every tiny little seed. But after the creation and the invention of the cotton gin, plantation owners were like, we've got to plant cotton because now it makes tons of money and you can produce lots of it super fast. So slavery grew a lot because of the cotton gin. Some other agricultural inventions or inventions for the farm. John Deere made the steel plow. This increased agricultural production, so that means that you could plant crops faster. And also Cyrus McCormick made something called the mechanical reaper. So this means that you could harvest your crops and cut down your fields a lot faster. A guy named Bessemer, he made a process called the Bessemer steel process. Now, what this meant is that you took really weak iron and you used fire and stuff like that and air to create really strong steel. So you would take really weak iron and you would make it into really strong steel. And you're probably thinking, who cares? That's not that big of a deal. But if you think about it back then, most everything was made out of wood. So when you can start making out of steel, it's a lot more strong and sturdy and lasts longer. This really encouraged the railroad and the making buildings that were a lot stronger. Now, speaking of the railroad, transportation was a huge thing during the Industrial Revolution because we're making all these products, but if we can't send products to shops or stores or to the people very fast, then really making a bunch of products doesn't make sense. So there was a lot of transportation inventions. For instance, the steamboat. A guy named Robert Fulton, he decreased the travel time on the water by making a boat that was powered by steam, not just by the air or the wind. We also started making our own rivers or waterways called canals. So canal is a man-made waterway and they were mostly found in the Northeast and they connected cities by water. So you could connect one factory to a town that had lots of stores or something like that. And so it was a man-made waterway that you could take a boat down or even one of the new steamboats, which made stuff even more fast. And then obviously you had something called the railroad. It was the fastest form of transportation on land. Okay, it made sure that you could transport goods, products, and people all over the place in a very, very quick way. Now, this led to the growth of cities and also helped with westward expansion as we start to try to make a railroad that goes from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the Pacific Ocean. So, this is called the Transcontinental Railroad. And the last invention I want to talk about here is the improvement in communication, something called the telegraph. So Samuel Morse made this thing called the telegraph, and it allowed people to communicate over long distances with little beeps and sounds that was transferred through the wires. Okay, now this is like the old school text messaging or emailing, if you want to think of it that way. The telegraph was the first way to communicate from long distances without having to send a letter or something like that. You could send a sound, and that sound could be decoded into a message. Now, a big thing that this caused, you have urbanization. Okay, so you have people moving from the farms into the cities, but you also have a lot of immigrants. And an immigrant is a person who moves to America from a different country. Now, one of the main reasons that somebody would move from a different country was to find a job in America because now with factories, there's a lot more jobs in America that people could get. So we have three main types of immigrants that come move into our country. So here's a little table. So from where? Let's just start with our first one. We have the Irish. We have lots of people from Ireland coming over to the United States. Their main reason for coming? They didn't have enough food in their country because of something called the potato famine. And what they did when they got to the United States is they worked a lot of times in factories. You also have Chinese. Okay, Chinese people are coming from China. A lot of times they're escaping religious persecution or political problems inside of their country. When they got to the United States, the Chinese really helped with the railroads. And then finally, you have the Germans. Now, the Germans didn't really have a good quality of life. Okay, most of them were really, really poor. It was really hard to find a job. And so they wanted to move to America to find jobs. Their main occupation was building canals and working in the factories like the Irish. Now, this is all about the Industrial Revolution, urbanization, the factory system, the inventions, and how immigrants came to the United States. This is the Industrial Revolution and how machines changed the United States.